Ohio remains up for grabs and COVID cases set records. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Michael Miller, former Franklin County prosecutor, Sam Gresham of Common Cause Ohio, and Karen Kassler, State House Bureau Chief for Ohio Public Radio and Television. With voting ending in about 2 weeks and Ohio's 18 electoral votes still in play, the two campaigns started the week in the Buckeye State. Vice President Mike Pence was here in Columbus. Joe Biden made stops in Toledo and Cincinnati. Both told very different stories about how Republican tax cuts have affected Ohio's workers.
They told me after President Trump's tax cuts, the Safcos bought 70 new pieces of equipment and trucks. Some of them are right around us here. They gave, more importantly, they told me they gave their employees substantial pay raises, and Savco and Sons doubled in size, and they are hiring today.
He passed a tax bill for the super wealthy and corporations that actually provided incentives for companies to move jobs overseas. Folks, manufacturing is the backbone of America. But we're in a manufacturing recession because of Donald Trump, even before the COVID virus hit.
The visits came as the latest poll shows no movement. Biden and Trump remain basically tied. Like Miller, of course, President Trump won Ohio by 8 points 4 years ago, so a tie is good news for Joe Biden. How are Republicans viewing this race with, 2.5 weeks to go?
Well, Mike, I think the Republicans in this state are probably not much different than the Republicans in the other 49 states. So far as the election in November, I think for the country that Biden wins. I don't think it's a pro-Biden thing at all. Here's a guy that never won a primary in his life until South Carolina. So I don't think there's some huge swell for Biden. I think the Democrats got together and decided that Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren were just too far left. They needed to get somebody in between. They got Joe Biden, who certainly doesn't have any enemies. He's got a good history. And I think a lot of Republicans have bolted, not because their principles have changed, but they just have had it with Trump and his antics and so forth. I mean, you look at, from George Will to Cindy McCain, and I suspect Peggy Noonan's going to be there too, and John Kasich, Mitch Romney. There's a lot of people pulling away from it. Now, having said that, I think Ohio, the last poll that I saw, and I'm a poll believer, despite what happened 4 years ago, and it's got pretty much a dead heat. And if it's a dead heat in the poll-wise, then I think Trump wins Ohio. I think there's just many people all over the country that don't want to say they're going to vote for Trump because they'll be called everything in the world by their friends and so on. And I think there's a lot of those people, and on a close election, I think they'll go with Trump. Yeah. But I don't think it's going to have any effect in the nation and the total final outcome.
Sam Gresham, I mean, the polls are almost exact as to where they were 4 years ago when Hillary Clinton had a double-digit lead nationally. She had a slight lead here in Ohio. What's to make us believe that the same thing won't happen again and Donald Trump pulls it out in the last couple of weeks of the campaign?
Believe it or not, I'm nervous too, because I'm not like Mike. I'm not a big supporter in the polls. I'm not sure how they're going to work, but there's some data that I find very, very interesting. And Mike pointed out one. The difference in Ohio is between Trump and Biden is 0.6%. That's typically, that didn't exist last time. He's winning the states of North Carolina by a teeny bit, 3.5%. He's winning Pennsylvania. He's winning Michigan. He's winning most of the states. In Ohio, there's another thing I want to point out, and I thought this was interesting. Republican counties didn't take out many requests for absentee ballots. It was the major counties, the big cities. They took out, the small counties took out less. So that means they have to show up for the polls for election where the large counties. I think there's some dubious things in the poll, but I'm going to point out one more thing. I think the election is too close right now. And I think that Trump may do something crazy because he may panic. And I don't know what that crazy is. He had his October surprise, but the attorney general messed that up, and that didn't happen. So he's got to do something else. I'm a little on edge right now.
Let's take a closer look at the polls. The polls do show that Donald Trump continues to do very well among whites without a college degree, but he has lost ground in just about every other category here in Ohio. Take seniors, for example. In the 2016 exit polls, they show Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 13 points among people over the age of 65. The latest Quinnipiac poll, which came out this week, shows Trump trailing Biden by 8 points. Karen Kassler, that is a 21-point swing among senior citizens. That is an incredible number if it's true.
And that is a bloc that votes and votes reliably and votes religiously. And so to be underwater with that group is really, really important at this point. The other group that Trump is underwater with is women. There's a huge gender gap when it comes to women and how they see Trump. And that's another area that is really one to watch, especially suburban women. You hear Trump talking about suburban women a lot in an effort to try to woo them back. But we saw this in 2018. Suburban women and the suburbs in general were starting to get a little bluer. In fact, 3 suburbs around the Columbus area, those House seats flipped. So that's something that I think is happening in different parts of the state, and it's something to look out for. But back to Sam's point there about the number of people who have requested absentee ballots in Ohio. In 60 Ohio counties, including the 3 largest, and I'm looking over here at my notes, Democratic affiliated voters mailed in 240,000 more absentee ballot requests than Republican affiliated voters. Most voters are not affiliated, but that's a huge differential here. You have a lot of Republicans saying they're going to vote in person, but it will be interesting to see whether Democrats will indeed have a big lead going into Election Day.
Let's look closely at those votes. It does look like Ohio voters are excited. Nearly 8.1 million voters have registered to vote. That's just shy of the state's record set in 2008. Republicans have a slight edge over Democrats. And as Karen said, more than half of the registered voters say they are unaffiliated. Sam Gresham, what is it organization that's driving this registration? Is it hatred of Donald Trump? What is, do you think, driving the registration? And then, at least to start, the long lines at the early voting centers?
I think there are 2 things. COBA fatigue is one of the factors. And also, we're tired of Donald Trump and his antics. People are just tired. There's no place I can go or anyone I can talk to. And it's not anger, it's fatigue. They just tired. They want to get this over and move on to something else. Like Mike says, they just want to get it over. It's a nightmare that's been hanging around for a long time. But also, Donald Trump has run a horrible campaign. If you look at the mechanics of his campaign, and what is his message? What are his goals and objectives? What is his platform? He has none of that. He just scream at people and say what's wrong and what's right. Now,
that works when you're the challenger, which Donald Trump was 4 years ago. Mike Miller, when you see where Joe Biden went, he went to Cincinnati. And if you look at the polls, the New York Times poll from last week, that's the part of the state that really is still up for grabs. Franklin County has definitely gone towards Democrats, Cleveland, Democrat stronghold. But Cincinnati seems to be a place where it's really up for grabs. Is that what he's trying to do down there, do you think?
Well, I think so. He's going places that he thinks are in play, and I think that's a smart thing to do. And, again, when Biden appears, and nobody dislikes Joe Biden. A lot of people dislike Donald Trump, but he goes and talks in the places where he thinks he can have an effect. Like you say, there's not much sense coming to Franklin County or spending much time here. He's going to win that easily. Cuyahoga County, it's no question. It's that way every year. So, he's doing the right things. And of course, I get a kick out of everybody's campaign. You've heard me say for years the same thing over and over and over again. And, every 4 years, it's the Democrats announce that whoever the Republican is, he's trying to steal Social Security. I mean, it goes over and over and over. And the Republicans are not doing it much this year, but they probably forgot. But the Democrats are soft on crime over and over and over. I mean, it's the same thing every 4 years. I hear very few things from either one that are really true. It's just, it's spin. And, I just get so tired of it. I'll be happy when it's over.
Yeah, good luck with when that being over, the threats on Social Security, until they at least reach a grand bargain anyway. Karen Kessler, how confident are Republicans that they will get their vote out on Election Day? Because that's what the polls are saying, that the diehard Republicans, they're just waiting to vote on Election Day, and if they're enthusiastic for Donald Trump, that will help him carry the state.
Well, the Quinnipiac poll that you referenced earlier suggested about half of people say that they're going to vote early, half of people say that they're going to vote on Election Day. And that's where Republicans seem to think that their voters are going to turn out. The key counties, though, and Mike was just talking about this, the key counties to watch, I think, are Montgomery County and also Ottawa County, Portage County. Those counties flipped for Donald Trump, voting for a Republican for president for the first time since 1988. So those are going to be big, important counties to watch. Also Lake County. And so I imagine that those are the areas where you might see Trump visiting. He had spent a lot of time in the Youngstown area last time. I'm not sure whether he'll go back there as much. Sherrod Brown in 2018 took a lot of the gains that Donald Trump had put in his column back into the Democrats' column. So watching and seeing where the candidates end up in the next 2 weeks will be very interesting.
Sam Gresham, Kamala Harris was supposed to campaign in the Cleveland area today, Friday, but she canceled the trip after two folks connected to her campaign tested positive for COVID. She tested negative, and she didn't come in close contact with those folks, but out of an abundance of caution, which is the phrase of the past couple of weeks, she decided to cancel her trips. But Democrats need the African-American vote in Cleveland to put them over the top here in Ohio. Kamala Harris was presumably going to do that, or try to do that during her visit. How energized are African Americans to vote for Joe Biden?
I think he is energized to the level to be expected. The problem in Cleveland right now is there's a leadership transition going on. The old guard is died and moved on, and they're fighting for who's going to be the new guard in Cuyahoga County. Some young people want to be in the lead, and it's just rough right now to find Arnold Pinckney, George Forbes. Those type of people have not surfaced yet. So Cuyahoga County is going to be a question mark for a while. Now, hopefully we will see better turnout. Mike, I've said on this program, it's turnout for the Democrats. As a county that we're monitoring, Cuyahoga is very important. And you mentioned earlier, Cleveland, Cincinnati are also, Cincinnati is also important too, because it could make the difference if they could turn out the Black communities in both of those counties.
All right, to help you cast your ballots as well as investigate the candidates and the issues, we urge you to check out the 89.7 NPR News Voter Guide. It is at wosu.org/voter guide, so check that out. It has some great videos. Takes you step by step how to cast your ballot, and also a lot of information about the candidates and the issues that you will decide over the next 2 weeks if you haven't decided already. While much of our attention has focused on the vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court and how Amy Coney Barrett could swing that court further to the right, the Ohio Supreme Court could see a swing to the left. That's if Democrats get their way. There are two races for Supreme Court. Republican incumbents Sharon Kennedy and Judy French face challenges from John O'Donnell and Jennifer Brunner. Karen Kessler, you moderated a debate with these four candidates just in the past week or so. We're not really paying a whole lot of attention to this as average voters, but the parties sure are. Is that correct?
Absolutely. On the ballot, these are nonpartisan races, but they are very partisan when you look at how the parties view them. And I think that, for instance, in 2018, when two Democrats were elected to the Ohio Supreme Court, Democrats were thrilled about that, especially since a lot of the ballot Republicans were elected. Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Auditor, and Governor all went to the Republicans. 2 seats on the Supreme Court went to Democrats. And so they were really pleased about those victories. They're hoping that this time might be another success for them. It would be the first time, like you said, since 1993 that the Supreme Court would actually be dominated by Democrats. And that was only for a very brief period. You got back to the 80s for a little bit longer than that. It was difficult to moderate a panel where you're discussing things with judicial candidates because there's so much they can't talk about. They can't talk about cases that are going to come before them, cases that they might rule on, how they might rule. They can't talk about that. So we talked about ethics. We talked about the role of the judiciary, especially in settling differences between the other branches of government. And there were some differences that you could see between the candidates in the two races.
At least the Ohio Supreme Court candidates only refused to answer those questions for 1 hour, where in Washington it was, 15 hours. So anyway, Mike Miller, how do you see the Supreme Court races? How big of a shift would it be if the Democrats were to take control of the state's highest court?
Well, I may be naive, Mike, but I would hope there wouldn't be a great change. Judges are supposed to interpret the law. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you sit down, you look at the law, you look at past precedent, and hopefully you would come out reasonably the same way most of the time. Now, I suppose on major social issues, that's going to be different because they're driven by different thoughts, and they'll try and interpret the law to fit that their belief, be it left or right. But I don't think there would be a major change. I think 2 years ago, the Republicans didn't spend a lot of time on the Supreme Court, didn't raise a lot of money. The business people didn't give a lot of money. And I think that did not happen this time. I understand they all have a lot of money. I read something recently where they've each raised, all four, over $500,000, something like that, Karen. So everybody's going to have the money. And, it just depends. If you get your slate card out, it's got, if you're a Republican, who to vote for. And if you're a Democrat, it's got who to vote for. So I think there'll be close races. One of the Democrats has run twice before. This is his third time, so he's pretty well known. And Kennedy, I think this is her second time. I'm not sure, it might be third, because she had an unexpired term. But anyway, they're all fairly well known. And French, and of course, around here, Court of Appeals, Jennifer Brunner is well known. So I look for good races, and I would have to, if I handicapped it, I'd give a slight edge to the Republicans at this point.
Karen Kasler, business interests. A lot of business cases come before the Supreme Court. The past courts have been criticized for being too generous to business interests, and that is a divide that the campaigns are trying to capitalize on, correct?
There was an interesting thing that happened right before this debate where the Business Roundtable had suggested to CEOs that they need to tell their employees to vote for the conservative justices because a stable court would be better for those employees' jobs. And I asked Judy French about that, and she said she supports that effort. Sharon Kennedy didn't comment on whether she supports that or not. But then on the other side, you had Democrats, Jennifer Brunner and John O'Donnell, who have not signed a clean campaign pledge, which would require that they denounce ads that imply how they might vote or how their opponent might vote on a particular issue. They say they want to reserve their own judgment. So, there are some ethical issues here. A lot of talk about judicial restraint, judicial activism, what those things even mean. And the City Club of Cleveland, and I'll be leading a discussion there on Monday, a virtual discussion about the difficulty in trying to elect justices and judges in general because there's so much they can't talk about. It really makes it difficult for a voter to try to figure out who should I pick when I can't really find out a whole lot about what these people believe and what might happen if they are elected to these positions.
Sam Gresham, a cause near and dear to your heart is gerrymandering and congressional redistricting. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court last year, or earlier this year, basically washed their hands of it. They said, we're not going to do anything on congressional or federal redistricting. We'll leave it to the Congress. We'll leave it to state legislatures. But of course, state legislative districts in Ohio are also pretty well gerrymandered, and that falls under the Ohio Constitution, which does fall under the Ohio Supreme Court. What might a change in the court mean for that? And are you watching that angle pretty closely?
Yes, we are watching it because we have two new processes coming into existence in 21, a new process to select the congressional people and a new process to select the state house people. So it could have an effect on us from the standpoint of the perceptions of the jurists to the gerrymandering effort. I also think there's another thing that's happening here. Down ballot candidates are going to be affected by two things, a low turnout or a tsunami. My view of this election in Ohio, it will be low turnout in some aspects or a tsunami in the other. And if the tsunami is blue, I think it helps the Supreme Court candidates versus not having that big turnout. And I do think it's going to be a tsunami or somewhat in between. And it'll be interesting to see how that affects the Supreme Court.
All right, our last topic, Ohio is seeing its sharpest increases in COVID-19 cases in months. The state saw a record number of new cases on Wednesday and then topped that number on Thursday, and Friday's number was just as high. The rate of new daily cases has basically tripled from where it was last month. The state advisory map is almost all red and orange, with 29 counties having very high exposure and spread of coronavirus. Governor DeWine called it a red tide flowing over Ohio, that virtually every Ohioan is living amid a high rate of spread, but he is not ready to issue closure orders.
We don't have any plans to do shutdowns, but no governor can stand up here during a pandemic and say, under no circumstances will we shut something down. And that would be irresponsible.
Karen Kasler, no shutdowns, but the governor is still holding bars to have their last call at 10 o'clock p.m., of course, for alcohol, and they have to close by 11. No loosening that, which he considered.
Right. There were communities, Columbus, Cincinnati, and others who had said that, hey, they wanted this to be lifted because bars are in a unique position in that these restrictions have been very difficult for them. And DeWine said at the press conference that he's hoping next week to announce some sort of state assistance for bars and maybe even restaurants, I guess, that have been uniquely affected by what's been happening during the pandemic. These numbers are terrible. I mean, when you consider over 4,700 confirmed dead, over 5,000 total deaths, and the numbers, we've been over 1,100 confirmed cases every single day for more than a week. And those numbers, the governor's worried, are going to translate into deaths later on. And here we are, we're getting into the colder weather where people will be indoors more. And holiday season where people want to get together. People, as Sam keeps saying, people are fatigued. They're tired of this. They want to move on and they want to go back to normal. But unfortunately, these numbers show that we're not normal yet. And that's the real concern.
Mike Miller, before we went on the air, you were saying how you really haven't been out since March. You must be getting tired of this. What is the solution should these numbers spike up again? Do we have to shut things down officially again?
Well, Mike, I don't know. I hope not. There's a theory, everybody has their different theories. Sweden did not shut down and their numbers were bad to begin with. Now they're very good. But, I'm a believer in Fauci. Some people aren't, some do, some don't. And Fauci and all those people have said back in March and back in April and the day-to-day news conferences that we meaning basically the country, not Ohio, the country, and perhaps the world, are due for a large increase in the fall. They've said it over and over and over that this was going to happen. This has happened. Paris is locked down. This isn't Donald Trump. This is a disease that has taken over the planet. Country after country after country is having these problems. And it's terrible. The ones that business people have to close, they're really paying for this. It's drastic. They're losing their businesses, income, savings, really tough. On the other hand, you've got the health angle. So I guess I would be with the people that say don't close down unless it becomes the last possibility. Maybe we can get more people to wear masks, more people to do some things that would help all of us. But I just feel so sorry for the small business people who are really taking the brunt of this.
Sam Gresham, where is the balance here between economic well-being and, health and physical well-being?
The balance is that a national and local government puts resources in the street to keep these businesses going and also mandate closing places down. I mean, if the thing is they need money, fine, let's put some money on it. But I don't believe I can make a conclusion which is better, the economy or my personal life. I think most times I'll come down on my personal life. I don't think it should be a conundrum. Government needs to respond. So what Mike said, the guy don't have to worry about going out of business. And we can shut things down to keep people from transmitting this disease. The only thing I know that works right now is a mask, a shield, and 6 feet of social distancing.
Right.
And if you go outside of that, you're going to just make it worse.
And wash your hands. Also,
And
wash your hands. All right, time now for our final off-the-record parting shots. Mike Miller, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm just going to say something that's obvious to everyone. My wife and I have been doing a lot of traveling during COVID in the state of Ohio, 150, 200-mile trips a couple days a week just for something to do. I've been to places I've never been to before. And it's just amazing to me. You get out of Columbus in particular areas, Clintonville, Beach Wall, so forth. You don't see any signs, hardly any, except Biden, Harris, Biden, Harris. You go outside and drive all around the state until you get to another major city, and you don't see any signs except Trump, Pence, Trump, Pence.
There's a
It's
divide.
just amazing seeing that, the split in our state between urban people and rural people, if you will.
All right, Sam.
And,
Sam Gresham, your final thought.
I am really concerned about one group of people, and those are football players, both college, high school, and professional. They're being required to go out and play. And this is going to have a long-term effect on them. I think the NCAA should get all athletes who pay through this period lifetime health care. And I think the NFL should do the same thing.
All right,
Because
I
they
gotta
are going to be.
I got to get to Karen here real quick. 30 seconds left, Karen.
Well, I'd like to recommend a house in the Cleveland area for Mike to go look at. It's got a coronavirus-themed Halloween display that is really spectacular. And also, I'm mourning the loss of Tab, my favorite drink in the whole wide world. After 60 years, the pandemic has killed off my favorite soda, and I'm going to be a Diet Pepsi girl now, I guess.
Oh, that's terrible. I can't top that. Anyway, that's it. Columbus on the record for this week. Check us out online, WOSU.org. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good one.